And so I think right now we're approaching what seems like complete extinction of the human race if you look at it on that linear graph.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that, but
Yeah.
yes, okay, keep going. But I can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like everything's falling apart. In many ways, it is. And if you don't understand the potential of what's coming for birthing a new paradigm,
Could be pretty bleak.
yeah, it could be very bleak. I mean, I feel deeply within myself, and I know as you do from the actions that you're taking that. I know that humanity is capable of miracles, and I believe in the human spirit. To me, the most beautiful person who's found acceptance in that, and not just on the never-ending path of self-improvement, but actually self-acceptance.
Well, that's the full journey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is hopefully where we get, is that maybe self-acceptance is what profoundly changes our world. That we can finally accept that we've become the change that we wanted to see. André Duqum, it's such a pleasure to have you here with me. I'm so excited to have you, my good friend. And this, I guess, our third time we've had a conversation, but now you're in the other seat.
Yeah, we get to switch spots.
I know. So cool to have you here. So tell me about your whole history. I'd love to hear. I had the opportunity to meet your mother and your sister, who were amazing. And but I'd like to hear kind of your story of how you got to this place right now. And for those of you that don't know, André is an amazing podcaster. He's built up a podcast that has grown rapidly, especially in the sort of spiritual and consciousness space over the past year, right? It's been about a year and a month or so, I'd say. And I remember the first time when you first started, I saw a few of your sort of outtakes and stuff. I was like, who is this guy? And then it was probably 2 weeks later that you reached out to me and said, hey, would you like to do a podcast with you? I was like, damn, who is this guy? Man, he's on it already. So it's been a year. How do you feel about it?
It's the most exhilarating ride, and I feel like the biggest life hack, and super aligned with my dharma, and brings me so much joy. And yeah, I feel like I've just been so grateful to position myself where I get to do the thing that I love so much, which is learning more about the true nature of myself, the world around me. I think that every human I get to sit across from is just a well of mystery and fascination and so much curiosity that I just have. And I hope that stays alive with me forever, because I think there's so much that we can learn from every person that we sit across from. And, really cultivating that capacity we have to listen to somebody at a deeper level and help draw out their genius, help draw out what they have to share with the world and what we can learn. But then also as a podcast host, stewarding that for education for the world just feels so, it feels like the biggest, I feel like it's the most awesome career path. It's like good to sit down with brilliant minds and have these conversations. So very humbled, very grateful. And I love it.
That's so amazing. So when did you decide you were going to do this? I mean, when did you start thinking, okay, one day I'm going to do a podcast? Because when I was a kid, podcasting wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Right? There was nobody, it wasn't like a list of, but neither was like, sort of Sound Healer and stuff like that too.
Right.
That didn't exist.
Yeah,
but today it all exists. So when did you decide that you were going to do this?
Yeah, I think also same, like when I was a kid, podcasting wasn't a big thing. I think the internet was just starting to boom. And my journey, my history, that's such a big question. But really, when I moved out to LA about 8 years ago, I started to dive more into freelance video work, started shooting content and making videos for people in the yoga, conscious influencer kind of niche, and just started learning and networking a lot in this kind of field, in this industry, and meeting some awesome humans. And a cool opportunity opened up to work and eventually move and live with the big YouTuber at the time. And at that time, I helped him launch his own podcast, Impulsive. It's a big show on YouTube now. And I got to just really develop my skill set, learn how the whole game and industry of podcasting really works, from the post-production side of thumbnails and titles and guest selection, and the host side of things, and the production of actually shooting the podcast. And I really took all of that knowledge and skill set that I developed and the connections also at the time, and created my own production company where we, started producing shows for dozens of conscious creators in their own fields and personal development and health and wellness shows. And yeah, it really just came about 2 years ago, year and a half ago, when I sat down and really just started considering creating my own show. Because I've had a lot of practice creating a lot of other people's show. I've had a lot of success, made a lot of mistakes. And it really kind of came like the idea was ripe. It was just time for
now, you've actually taken that now and you teach this even.
Yeah.
You're even teaching this. So how do people learn about this with you? I mean, how do they engage with this? And, because there is a whole thing, I have to say, I'm still so new to this.
Yeah.
I mean, I've only really started doing this in earnest in the last several months.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a steep learning curve because there's so many weird twists and turns that you just don't understand. Like, I remember it was Christian Pitty, you might know him from Aubrey's podcast. And he's like, okay, so the whole game is about the thumbnail, bro. And I'm like, what's a thumbnail? What do you mean by the thumbnail? And I'm like, the little icon thing? He's like, yeah, that. I'm like, the whole thing is about that? And I'm like, surely you don't mean that. He's like, well, it's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so these types of things I could see real value in someone teaching others about how to work this. And then there's the algorithm, right? Which everybody is like, the algorithm. So I'm guessing that what you teach now actually goes into all those things, right?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of having a podcast is like very fantasized within, people that want to make an impact in the world, that want to create their own content and show, understandably so. Like, it's an incredible platform and medium. Also, there is a huge naivete of what goes into podcasting because it looks like you just sit down with some mics and talk, and like that's kind of it. And the days of that, potentially working are just long gone. You really do need to understand so much of what goes into it if you desire to have, a really big show. And big is relative. I think that somebody, having 100 listeners or 1,000 listeners on their show, I mean, you put that many people in a room, that's a lot of people listening and giving their life up to listen. So it's all relative. And I spent like 6 months kind of pouring everything I know into a course that people can look up called Podcast with Purpose, to give people an insight into how it all works. Because if you're going to do it, you should know how to do it well, and like know from people that have been doing it for a while, of like the do's and don'ts, how to really shorten that learning curve and make the most of it. Because if you're really going to take up this endeavor, it's just much more worthwhile for you to learn the potential pitfalls and the things that are really worthwhile and make the most difference. Understanding how to package media is a whole different skill set than interviewing and having passions about certain conversations that you want to steward in the world. So, it's definitely a big whole wheelhouse, I think, that I've been passionate about sharing with people, because I'm passionate about activating, these conscious conversations in the world personally with my own podcast, but I'm also very passionate about supporting other people activate their own voice and their own conscious creator voice in the world, because I think that we have the capacity now, unlike any other time, to really share these messages of awakening and consciousness from all walks of life to the other side of the planet. And it's just such an incredible gift. And the more that we can give people the skill set to be able to actually translate that gift in their voice into the world to share their impact, just the better. So
how did you come to the realization that it was your dharma?
I think dharma is ever evolving, and I think that I really love the Ikigai framework. For those that aren't familiar, it's really kind of the cross section of what you're good at, what you love doing, what the world needs, and what you can get paid for. I think that what you can get paid for, I mean, you can get paid for literally doing almost anything. And so I kind of put that off to the side and just see, like, what do I really love doing? Like, if I were to make a list of all the things that I feel like my soul just finds so much joy in doing, and then also all the things that I'm good at, what am I actually competent at? And that might have been from previous careers, different skill sets, things that we just naturally have an affinity towards. And then what the world needs. There's a myriad of different ways in which what we love and what we're good at can contribute to the benefit of the world. And so for me, the uncovering of my own dharma, if you want to say, and like realizing that podcasting and creating my podcast, Know Thyself, was very much so in alignment with what my soul is here to bring, and what feels so purpose driven and very fulfilling, to say the least, is because I love it. Like I would do it without getting paid. I would do it without other people getting to watch it and accumulating views and impact in the world, just for my own growth and insight. Getting to sit down with these individuals is so beautiful. I also really love connecting and meeting new minds, and I seem to be relatively decent at the packaging of the media and the video curation.
Well, the filmography background probably really helped, because you probably knew somewhat of the business side of it, especially
for sure
in what you did prior.
Yeah.
So that was probably very helpful for you.
Very much so, yeah. I mean, I think photography and videography is a skill set that can apply to almost any business, whether you have a hair salon or you have a food business.
These days especially.
For sure, being able to translate that in a world to to basically scale beyond just trading your own time in for money, but be able to kind of exponentially grow your impact in the world and help people find you is just such an incredible skill set. So, that's something that I'm pretty good at, is videography and storytelling in that aspect. I also, part of my desire and love for like listening, I've also feel like I've cultivated the skill set of asking questions that elicit unique responses for people. And so that's also a skill set. So like, all those in combination with these conversations really being impactful for the world, they kind of culminate into what you could say is your ikigai or purpose or dharma in a way that where I feel like life is using me to the best of its ability. I feel like really I'm being used by life in a good way.
So, okay. I mean, if I were to just say my experience that I had going on your podcast.
Sure, which, I'd love to hear.
Know Thyself podcast, which I think it resonated. The name already resonated because I was always a big fan of that particular way of looking at the world. Socrates has always been a favorite of mine. And so I was thinking, okay, I felt like there was sort of some alchemical / Indian / a little bit of New Age vibe that was sort of mixed into all of it. And here's this young guy, good looking, smart. And when I sat down with you for the first time, I was struck by the profundity of your questions. So I think you're a master at doing the research and coming up with just the right questions that draw things out of people that maybe they wouldn't otherwise contemplate or look at so deeply, but for the fact that they're sitting in a podcast chair and they're sort of the spotlight's on them. How did you come to that? Was that also part of the filmography background, or was that something that you just honed over time?
I think part of it is innate since 15, 16. I've always very much so like seen myself kind of as a truth seeker and reading voraciously different philosophical texts. And
that was clear too, that you read a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, it's for me, it's like when I get the opportunity to sit down with somebody that I can have a 1, 2, up to 3 or plus, more hour conversation. First off, that's a lot to ask of somebody. I really want to honor their time and also honor their being. In a way, their life path has uniquely, like God is expressing themselves individually through them in a completely unique way. Like we all have a fingerprint. They have a unique soul's expression. And the feeling I have is like I really get to honor this individual and help draw out and help really just create a space for their own wisdom, their own brilliance, their own humor, all to kind of come to the surface to, of course, be captured and shared, but also just in dialogue in a way that feels really good to me. It feels good to honor people in that way. But then also as time goes on, one podcast after the next, you start to, if you put in this time for preparation and you listen and like watch their series on Gaia and you read the books that they have and you watch other podcasts they've been on and really start to understand and try to get this person's reality and see what's uniquely coming through them. Then over the course of a year, you have 52 podcasts if you're doing every single week. And now you have this beautiful library in which people can come and pull a book off the shelf and get a deep dive into somebody's reality and somebody's life. That's like a fractal pattern into the cosmos. It's a really beautiful thing. And I just like to think of the podcasting journey as kind of weaving this amazing tapestry. And you don't get to see the full picture until you're years down the road. But all that really matters is taking it podcast by podcast, conversation by conversation, person by person, and really trying to honor that individual.
What's really interesting too is that when you did reach out to me and said, I'd like to do a podcast with you, I was immediately struck because I was like, okay, who is this young guy, first of all? But that was an advantage.
For sure.
It was a huge advantage because if somebody is, from your age demographic and everything, reaching out to someone my age and saying, I'd like to do a podcast with you, it's like, first of all, he's got some moxie, right? Or he or she. And I'm like, that demands attention right off the bat, right? So secondly, people that are in positions like me and peers of mine, we want to help young people. We do. We want to help advance them. I don't know that many people that don't, actually. Yeah. I mean, there are some probably exceptions in the world.
Of course.
But I was so struck that I was like, okay, I got to meet this guy. So yes, it was a drive. It's a huge amount of time, because for me to go to Venice, because that was when you lived in Venice before you moved, it was probably at that time of day like 2.5 hours or something drive, which is like yikes. And then I'm going to this house, and in Venice, like so many houses have podcast studios in them, which is kind of funny. And I walk in there and I'm like, well, this is like a tiny room.
It was, yeah.
It was a tiny room, but it was so perfectly appointed. I was like, damn, this is like epic. And it was very intimate. Yeah. And so I thought, this guy has put so much thoughtfulness into constructing this atmosphere. And from the choice of the books on the table to the ones that were on the shelf to every aspect of it. And I just came away thinking, well, this guy's really got his, ish together, which is like rare. And so first I want to commend you on that, because that was my experience. And I'm sure that was probably the experience for most. And that's why how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so, as you have kind of gotten through this and you've met with all these people along the way, what are the key takeaways that you've sort of been able to glean from this spiritual journey just by interviewing and meeting with all of these different, profound personalities?
Yeah, the truthful answer is that it's impossible to quantify, because every conversation does really uniquely impact me, and I'm changed because of it. But also over the course of a year and a half, when you're doing dozens and dozens of these podcasts, I mean, from the connections, I've met some of my best friends. I've gotten to incredible opportunities. I've gotten to just learn so much. I feel like you've got an inside scoop with like many of those individuals and things that we've done, which I'm sure we'll get into. One of the biggest things is I realized just how much I don't know. There's like,
the more we learn, the less we feel like we actually know.
Yeah, it's like the more my own, circle or bubble of knowledge grows, so too does the circumference or the perimeter of my ignorance. Like I realize how much I don't know, how much there is to still learn. And that's exciting, because there's a never ending well of knowledge to be gained. But I kind of come back to those core tenets of like what I really value. And for me, it's change what I perceive physiologically, psychologically, really brought so much humility into my own view of spirituality, the differences and how unique everybody's perspective is. And, that's something that I think, you speak to a lot, and you shared on my show, of like this switch from trying to accumulate more facts to understanding and perceiving more facets of truths. And I think that's so much of the podcasting journey, is your understanding and getting to get somebody's reality, all these different facets of truth, of the diamond that is, this game of life. And so, I think that, you've been an incredible example of an individual that I've gotten to have, like 5 or 6 hours just in the podcast studio of diving deep. And where else do you get the time to get somebody's time to dive deep into these topics, right? So it's an incredible opportunity and excuse to be able to do so. And I'm forever changed by it. Yeah.
I feel like you also become friends with the people that you podcast with.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, they're part of your world now, right? And I think that's a beautiful aspect too, because it's not just the integration that you have in the podcasting studio, but also you invite that in to the other aspects of your life in a very seamless way, which I think is also beautiful. It shows a degree of authenticity. So as you kind of look at your view on cosmology, right? Cosmology in general, what is this universe? Now that you've had this chance to speak to so many wisdom keepers, how do you perceive it, and how has it evolved for you along your journey?
such a big question, and there's so many different ways I can take it. Like I said, I feel like I really have come to start to really understand the magnitude of what I don't know and the vastness. I mean, there's that one, I forgot where it was taken, but from deep space, taking this picture of Earth where it looks like it's just a tiny microspeck.
Little blue dot.
Yeah, the little blue dot, right? That image that came to the surface. And that just...
I think it's from Voyager.
Yeah, I think so. So, I mean, when you put the Earth in that context of, you zoom way out and we're this tiny little microspeck, and within that, America or California or Laguna or Topanga or Venice is a tiny microspeck within that. And then within that, we are this tiny microspeck. There's so much humility and I feel like awe that comes from realizing how small we are. But on the flip side, realizing that in deep moments of stillness and silence, I feel like I'm everything, and it's like, I forgot who said that quote, but, wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. And in between the two, my life flows. And so as I've been on this podcasting journey in conversation with all these brilliant minds, exploring the nature of consciousness, and really coming to realize how much we just simply don't know about what is the true nature of consciousness. One thing that I do feel very confident is that when you look at documentaries like The Matrix, they start to become more of, sorry.
I like that. You already classified.
I already classified it.
The Matrix as a documentary.
Yeah.
I saw a video. It's so funny you said that because just this morning, I watched this little video clip of Bruce Lipton.
Yeah.
Who said, and that was his whole beginning of it. It's like, The Matrix was not just a movie, it's a documentary type thing. And here you are repeating it back to me. So clearly the universe is also trying to tell me something through you. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
A documentary called The Matrix.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it really does feel like it is a documentary. It's showing so much of how life is a mirror. And I tried to employ the same curiosity and level of listening in a podcast with any individual I come across, because in the human eyes is I get to peer into somebody's soul and how they're receiving reality. And with that, it becomes a mirror in which I get to expand my own consciousness. I would say that there's actually been an interesting kind of own shift in my own internal perception on this, even just the past month. I feel like within a lot of people's understanding of spirituality, especially westernized West LA, like there's a lot of spirituality that's kind of focused on egocentricity and like just our own path of awakening, our own path of self-remembering and awakening. And of course, we are part of the whole. We are both we are having an individual experience within a collective group. And yet at the same time, I've been broadening my horizon and understanding of spirituality to really be connected with the suffering of this world in a really tangible way. And that has been a shift for me that has at times actually been painful to see the ways in which I've viewed my own ideas of spirituality, either stopping within the confines of my own comfort and convenience, overly focusing, like I said, in kind of an egocentric way of just like trying to better myself, improve myself, know myself, and like, in ways being able to, with the privilege that comes from being affluent or giving to, have time and financial freedom, to not necessarily see the immense amount of suffering that's happening on the planet. And so this kind of came as a byproduct to a couple conversations with some friends recently that just really, as you grow, there's the possibility for egoic inflation. When you have new levels of awareness and insight into spiritual knowledge and whatnot, so too does your identity have the capacity to wrap around that and create an identity structure around it. And really create more separation between you and all life, which is not the goal, right? But we go on this path of contraction, expansion, expansion, inflation, deflation within our own ego and identity.
Inhalation, exhalation.
Yeah, exactly. And so for me, I've been on this path of really inquiring how I can get my hands more dirty in the world and like really even do mission work. And I think it's just really important to really allow the suffering of the planet to seep in you, to like see it, to feel it, and allow that to activate in whatever way we're most competent in serving the planet. Because maybe spending my whole life in a soup kitchen is not the best use of my time given my skill set and my ability to impact the world, and so discovering what that is. But I guess to try to come back within your original question of cosmology, you know, it's all really wrapped in within the one. I feel like this game of life is continually revealing to us where we're stuck and where we're limited within our own perception. And so opening up our will and aligning it to the divine will and opening up our perception to the cosmological perspective, I feel like is only going to create more a wholesome, integrative, balanced perspective of life as we walk through the world. So
can you unpack that just a little bit?
Sure.
So first of all, you talked about the West LA.
Yeah.
Which even just the tone of how you said it was like interesting.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of it seemed like it was like there's powder sugar of like, you know, on the top of it, which is, you know, kind of in the context of maybe that's superficial.
Uh-huh.
So can you dive more deeply into what that means? Are you talking about like solipsism?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's certainly the aspects of spirituality that becomes materialized, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's I hopefully try to say it without judgment, even though maybe you pick it up in my tone because this is this is the deeper even revelation into how I'm perceiving certain things. But the ego is a very slippery thing, and it's continually fighting for its own survival. And when we accumulate spiritual knowledge or some sort of insight, very quickly too does the capacity, like I said, the light that casts a shadow just equally as big. And if we're not walking a path of humility, I think we see this often in plant medicine circles where there's lots of buckets of awareness, right? Buckets of vomit, buckets of
buckets of vomit. Okay.
Buckets of awareness, and oftentimes we don't see as much the integration. And so, yeah, the West LA is like, you know, the wide brim hats and the going to Erewhon for $30
woke hats, right?
Yeah, the woke hats.
Yeah, I had dinner at Erewhon.
Okay.
A few days ago for the first time. And it was quite the social meetup. I mean, I had no idea. I felt like I was going to the high school cafeteria, actually.
It is very much like that.
But I was more like the college kid that was visiting the high school cafeteria. But it was kind of funny because it is a whole culture, and it's very different than anything else I've ever experienced. And so I understand what you're saying, where there's sort of this concept of, you know, I'm working on myself, you know, I'm working on, you know, raising my consciousness. And it reminds me of when I went to Dharamsala, India. Have you been before?
I have not.
So I got invited, I think I spoke about it on your podcast, but I got invited to teach the Dalai Lama prime number pattern. So, and it's actually pronounced Dalai Lama, but anyway. So I went there, and I brought 7 people with me. Nissim Haramain was one of them, and I brought Hans Kierstead, who is a stem cell scientist, and some other physicists and mathematicians. And Alan Green came as well, just for the comedic relief.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
And while we were there, we noticed a few things that were very interesting, which I thought was kind of fascinating. So some people, some of the Buddhist monks, the Tibetan monks, were wearing very tattered clothing. And then others were kind of like, they looked like they just got new shoes. It's kind of like you get your new white shoes and you kind of want to scuff them up a little bit because otherwise they look a little too new, right? And so I asked him, I'm like, so we got some people with like nice digs and then other people that are just like really tattered. And he's like, oh yeah, well that's the thing. And I'm like, I'm talking to Lama Tenzin, who's a friend of mine, who's like the guy that is responsible for everything for Dalai Lama in the United States. And he says, yeah, well, you know, when you become a Lama, you want to look more humble. Right. So you don't want your clothes to look new. So you want to try to find clothes that look more tattered. Right. And I said, but isn't that a form of attachment? He said, yes. And so I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. So for someone who wants to be more perceived as, you know, going down the spiritual path, you can fall into these kind of holes or potholes along the journey. Is that kind of I mean, I've noticed that to a certain extent as well with the whole West LA thing, which is like the woke hat, I'm spiritual, yada, yada, yada. And so people want to look more spiritual. And so then they also want to do the things that are perceived more spiritual. Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Yeah,
Okay. All right, keep going.
Yeah.
This is good. This is good. This is really good. This is like tear the Band-Aid off. Because
Right.
I think a lot of people think this, but don't really say it.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And like, listen, even we get to experience it because we're closer in proximity to it. And I have to acknowledge the parts of my own self, right? Because that's more of an interesting conversation to see where within myself do I still hold that, or like the spiritual materialism. And
That sounds so oxymoronic.
yeah.
Spiritual materialism.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going. This is fascinating.
So-
this might be a thumbnail.
Yeah. There you go. Don't get too ahead of yourself. So I really love Ken Wilber's framework of waking up, growing up, and cleaning up. And so like waking up is the part of us, right, that kind of wakes up to the illusion of who we are, and can, in deep moments of silence, tap into the limitless consciousness that we have within us. And you can go on this deep path of meditativeness and waking up to who you are. And just because you develop yourself in that area doesn't mean you've done the characterological work, doesn't mean you've grown up and you've done the deep shadow work and the parts work. And I think people kind of can combine them all as just like one, is like you're waking up, or you've developed, but they're not all the same. They're all different parts of ourselves, and we have these different dimensions within us that just developing one, for example, a new insight into spiritual awareness, doesn't heal your daddy wounds necessarily, right? And so there's just many different aspects to look at when you look at an individual on their path of growth and awakening. And I think this deserves a lot of compassion, because this is part of the process of waking up too, is like when we have new expanded awareness and then we contract down and we kind of lose sight. And, I just had this conversation with Dr. Robert Gilbert, who I love. You guys.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Actually, I was going to ask you to please connect us. I'd like to
you
meet
guys
him.
would. Incredible teacher on Rosicrucianism, and we talked about Ahrimanic and Luciferic, these different impulses within us. And the Luciferic impulse is like when you have this new insight or grow expanded, spiritually, then too oftentimes do people have this superiority that arises, and it creates more separation. But it's like better than, right? I am more evolved than, and then now you're interacting with different beings in that understanding. And it creates more separation. So yeah, I just really like to look at it with that framework of like waking up, growing up, and going on that path. So I, like I said, the past month has been a deeper examination of where do I still hold that? Where do I want to be perceived as a spiritual, holy, good individual on this path? Where can I make more space for my own humanity and vulnerable aspects? Because that truthfully is, I feel like, where I have even more room to grow than, I can sit down and find bliss in meditation fairly readily. And I say that with a lot of gratitude. Mm-hmm. And, the deeper emotional human stuff, I think, is even more of my work. So I'm preaching to the choir that is myself in this conversation too here, but I think it's a path. It's a beautiful weaving. And like I said, the inhale and exhale of our developmental
It's so
journey.
interesting you say this. First of all, it reminds me of the alchemical journey, which is the stages that start with nigredo and then go to albedo. And so this is like the first stage where you start to confront your shadow. You see a lot of crows, and each time you're seeing these crows, it's representing this confrontation of the shadow that's coming into your world, and learning how to integrate that shadow. But then you have a bit of a respite in the albedo, which is the whitening, which is the white swan, represents the swan. And a lot of people think, oh, I'm enlightened when they hit that stage. And that's usually the stage where you start having this increase of separation, because you start thinking, okay, well, I'm on the spiritual path. I want to be a good spiritual person. So I believe I need to have a checklist of things done, right? Which is like, okay, I'm going to get ayahuasca. I'm going to do a toad ceremony. I'm going to do 3 days of darkness. I'm going to do, you can sort of list out the things of, like, if we had like Boy Scouts for spirituality, it'd be like a merit badge list, right? And so people start talking about this stuff, and it creates, without them even realizing it, some degree of separation, right? And the thing is that one thing I've found is that everyone who, at all the readings I've done, which I'm sure you've probably read a lot of things I've read as well, is that the avatars, the real spiritualists, they teach the illusion. And that's the consistent theme. Like literally, they may not use the word simulation or the Matrix as a documentary, but they definitely teach the illusion. And that we can transcend the illusion, right? They also teach non-judgment, which is something that I've found. I try to look at people that over history, I've tried to see, okay, what are the common denominators of these people that really have achieved transcendence, a level of consciousness that is transcendent and had a huge impact on millions of people. And so the non-judgment thing becomes really, really important, because what I noticed is that sometimes when you get to the woke stage, it's almost like that's the albedo stage. It's along the path, the journey, but it's still early. It's before the yellowing, which is the peacock, represented by the peacock and all the feathers that look like eyes. And then from there it goes to sacrifice. So the true love of sacrifice, which is rubedo, which is the marriage of the red king and the white queen, and then on to the phoenix, which is what that represents right there. When I made that, it was an alchemical process.
Does that make you the white queen and me the red king and the phoenix right here?
Well, you are in the red side over there now. But basically, it was all about this alchemical process. I didn't even know that I was in it. Yeah. I didn't even know. I started sculpting. I started doing metallurgy and everything. It was an alchemical thing. I had no idea. I even made a golem. I had no idea what this stuff was. And I just started learning about it. I'd post pictures of people be like, dude, you're making a golem. And I'm like, what's a golem? And I go and look. I'm like, isn't that like the guy off of Lord of the Rings, But it's the story of the clay man and breathing life into the clay man, which is a rabbinical practice of spirituality. And so I had no idea. I went through these different steps and stages without even knowing that I was going through these steps and stages. It was just part of my soul's journey. But what I realized is that a lot of the people that were, referring to themselves as woke, right, were not fully of the knowledge yet of the non-judgment aspect, which is really about universal love and acceptance, right? And I think all those other accoutrements that come along and the path of the work that goes along with that, everyone has their own different journey. But the end result is always, that I've seen, this transcendence of love, where they only care about the people that achieve this love, and they love deeply and they empathize. It's not solipsism where they're like, I'm in my universe and nothing else matters and I'm just going to keep myself zen and it's all good. They actually fully and very deeply feel the pain and suffering that exists in the world and the joy. It's not just one way. They're very connected to the pulse, I guess, of the entire planet. And that's the thing that's been most beautiful along the path for me, to see the love and the non-judgment come in over and over and over again. And so I guess I didn't go through my spiritual awakening in West LA, right? I didn't even know that I couldn't even call it a spiritual awakening. When I was going through it, I was locked in my house for like 2 years doing math. And that was my personal journey. Learning this language of the universe by being hermetic, but almost from the standpoint of being a hermit. Mm-hmm. Do you think that people understand that these stages of awakening are, met by these different moments of expansion, the next stage being the peacock and the perspective and the many eyes of the peacock and all these symbologies that we find in alchemy, Rosicrucianism, right? These things have been left to us through time. What role does this play in helping people along their journey, this knowledge?
I think we look at all life and it's cyclical. There's the seasons and cycles of life around us, just like there are within us. And there's more obvious cycles within women. There's, I think, like within their own physical, biological process, right? And the connections to the moon. And I look at also like the 7-year journey, which I feel is like a death and rebirth of the cells in our body. And, there's the experience of separation, right? that ultimately that ignites the fire within us to come back into the truth of oneness, which is so beautiful when you're there. And you look at individuals like Mother Teresa or Jesus Christ. They didn't walk around in the world with this intellectual belief that we're all one. They knew it in their bones. They acted in the world as if we are all one, because we are all one. And that's what drew them to the poorest of the poorest places, and supporting those individuals and being with them, and even restoring dignity in the eyes of those that have lost it and their own humanity. I think that's so beautiful. And like the journey of getting there is that path of forgetting and remembering ourselves. Like we take that draft of forgetfulness as we come here, and we have our karmic experiences in life that we need to, those debts and credits that we have in this life that we need to experience. And really, I just look at life as providing us the contrast needed in order to be able to refine who we need. It's like looking at a block of clay or marble, and through the resistance the individual is realized. And so I think that the right amount of suffering and resistance is actually needed on our path in order for us to ultimately come into seeing who we are beyond that and choosing who we also want to be. And so that's what comes to mind. I'd also love to get your perspective on that.
Okay.
Because this journey of, we see a lot of individuals who take that draft of forgetfulness their whole life, and they live very unconsciously throughout all their days. A lot of individuals really go on a path that almost as an initiate to see all the challenges in my life as opportunities for growth. All the resistances that are experiencing wherever I'm suffering, these are ultimately opportunities for me to awaken to even deeper states of love within myself. And so, yeah, just any thoughts that you have on the purpose of forgetting and being in that place of unconsciousness so we can remember who we are.
Well, I mean, I think we've talked about this to a certain extent. I believe we create the game. But if you're omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, it wouldn't be fun to have all of those powers with you in the game. That'd be like the end of the game.
Yeah.
Right? It's like if you know everything and you're everywhere and you can be all powerful, then you just kind of like the game's over, right? It doesn't really make sense. So what you would do if you're in that position of the infinite and the divine, I believe, is that you would limit. You'd create an avatar that would limit all of those abilities, and then have yourself be fragmented so that you could experience. And that also serves another purpose, which is each of us becomes a unique receptacle of perception that then the universe can perceive itself through our eyes.
Yep.
Which is so beautiful, because I think one of the things that happens to so many people is that and it happened to me too. So, I mean, I'm not, and I'm always constantly struggling against this, right? It's like you find things that you had been maybe unconsciously judging about yourself, that then you find that you've actually been consciously judging it in everyone else. And so as a result, you then come to this realization where you go, wait a minute, I've been judging all these people. This is not good. I don't like myself. And that's why people want to change their names. They don't want to have anything to do with their ego anymore. They want to get rid of all the masks and become entirely authentic, which is great too. But somewhere along the journey, you realize that your persona, your ego, serves a purpose. It exists for a reason. It's not just to be daunting to us and to make life difficult. It's there for the universe to perceive itself through our eyes. There's never going to be another André. And there never has been you, even in your prior incarnations that are happening right now. Right? So I think that we serve a purpose where our ego actually is beautiful. And that is when you come to the realization that all the negative and suffering and difficult experiences that you have experienced actually become your greatest teachers. I don't even remember my teachers in junior high school and high school that didn't push me and make it difficult. Mm-hmm. I can't remember their names. I got invited back to my high school to give a speech at this Hall of Fame thing, in 2015. And they had all my teachers there that, throughout, this is in Nebraska, of all places. And so I got to see everybody, which was really a great honor, but I didn't even I realized that the teachers that I wanted to go and give a hug to right away were the ones that believed in me more than I believed in myself and pushed me harder than I ever thought I could take. And I kind of think that maybe when I die, that's how I'll look back on my life, that some of the more difficult moments in my life were the greatest teachers. And if I could hug those things and realize that those moments of difficulty and pain and lead and density actually transmuted into gold. And that was beautiful, right? So, one thing I can give you a mathematical analogy of this that I think might help put it in context. So we think of the square root of 2, and you're a musician, you're a great pianist. I didn't even know that until I saw it on Instagram one day. But you know what the diminished fifth is, right? The diminished fifth is like this, sounds very discordant kind of sound, and it's based on the square root of 2. So we could think of, if we have a circle and we split it in 2, and we've got 2 parts of that circle, 2 semicircles, then you've got, the concept of duality, right? So just imagine a circle, cut it in half. Now you've got 2 parts. Maybe one side's light and the other side's dark. So the way that you cut that circle is to cut it in 2, but its essence is infinite. And the infinite essence of the number 2 could be defined as the square root of 2, because it's an infinite number. It's 1.4142. It goes on forever. It never ends. It's like a spirit of the number. Think of it like the spirit of the number. I tend to try to apply meaning to mathematics, which then helps me learn it much better. Well, if we think that the essence of the number 2 is the square root of 2, what would be the essence of the number 3? Square root of 3, right? So you could say that what do we associate with the number 3? Trinity, right? Divine aspects. So when we look at our world of duality, and a lot of people don't like duality, they want to get out of duality. It's like, we're in an escape room. How do we get out of the escape room of duality? We need the context of the square root of 3. So if I take the square root of 2 and I add it to the square root of 3, do you know what it adds up to?
What would that be?
3.146. That's awfully close to another number, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pi. Mm-hmm. So the essence of duality and the essence of divinity in the Trinity come full circle.
That's pretty cool.
But now wait. We look at the symbol for Saturn. Have you ever seen the symbol for Saturn in alchemy? Like in astrology and stuff like that, they have a symbol. It looks kind of like the square root of 2. It's interesting that it does. It looks like the square root of 2. So we associate Saturn with lead. So this is how consciousness so beautifully works, right? We associate Saturn with lead. And so if I took the square root of 2 and I added the square root of 3, it equals pi, essentially. But if I look to see what percentage of the circle the square root of 2 represents, it turns out to be 44.9%. So if I take that 44.9% and I multiply it by the 360 degrees of the circle to find its ratio representation, guess what it comes out to in degrees? 161.8 degrees. Now, do you recognize 1618? That's the golden ratio. It's what's our DNA has a length of 34 angstroms and a width of 21, and the relationship between the two is 1.618. So wait a minute. When we add duality's essence to the divine essence, the two add together to pi to complete the circle. And what we thought was the difficulty of duality, the pain and the lead, just turned to the golden ratio.
Yeah, if y'all just got that, that's really rad.
You see what I'm saying? So to me, that's about the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
The Philosopher's Stone is about turning that lead of experience, all the difficulty and challenge, into the gold because we realized its purpose. And I think that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I think that's a major reason why we're here. And we have this pyramid right there, which is the Philosopher's Stone pyramid right behind us. And we just recently went together to Egypt.
We did do that.
And how was that for you?
The biggest question. I think we've all had experiences where we are just completely gobsmacked and the feeling of awe overwhelms us.
Did you get that word from Alan? Because he always says gobsmacked.
Probably subconsciously.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure I picked up many things from
Alan Green, yeah, he's a epic human being, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I really feel the word awe encapsulates the feeling when you're both in the physical structures of like the Great Pyramid and being on the plateau, and going to, chant in the sarcophagus and the King's Chamber and the subterranean chamber and getting to experience all that, which is incredibly powerful. But also the individuals that came is like, to me, that's the magic is so much alive.
And you played a huge role in curating that group. And I want to thank you because, wow, it was amazing.
Yeah, and it was incredible to weave with you. It's like,
It was so fun. It really was so fun.
The biggest, beautiful, cosmic scavenger hunt, spiritual adventure.
Wow.
So much fun, laughter, play, music, all of that too, It was so playful the whole time. And just want to acknowledge you for the... for really being a leader of the new paradigm, because you obviously put the bat signal out, reached out to Blue and I, and like helping curate the group and everything. But obviously you've been to Egypt so many times, the ropes there. And you also had like the spiritual and mathematical understanding of the timing that we're currently in, and like what would be powerful to do there is activations with our voice. And I just really believe in the human spirit, and when we bring the minds and hearts of individuals who have a relative awareness of where we're at and the potential we have for exponential growth, that magic happens. That really, like, miracles can occur in the presence of people truly seeing each other. And so you so beautifully showed up as a steward for that container. And, there's this powerful energy of also leadership behind the throne and not needing to be seen.
Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge the humility of like setting the container, being able to show up in moments when you're speaking with everybody, but then also rest back in the chair of allowing the magic to unfold within everybody. And so that was so powerful.
It was so beautiful how natural every moment of that trip was. I mean, that shows a degree of planning from our whole team, but to allow for the spontaneity, because the spontaneity was so natural. And, Matthias came up to me afterwards. He's like, I loved this week. This was like amazing. Everything was so natural, so beautiful. Everything was so harmonious. It was like a symphony.
Yeah.
It really was. And I really thank you for the role you played. But more important than what happened in Egypt, I'd like to know how it impacted you.
So right before I went to Egypt, I went to Portugal for 4 days. That put some extra context into like what I feel like transpired within me in Egypt, because I got to go to this place called the Quinta de la Regalera, butchering how to actually pronounce that, but basically this is like old Freemasonry temple palace.
So you did. So we talked about that before you left, and you went.
I went.
I knew it. I knew it. No way.
We didn't. It was very spontaneous, but like it was kind of, for anybody that's read or listened to the Celestine Prophecy, where you're kind of on the spiritual adventure, and you go up and you show up for the unknown, and we get lunch right when we land there, my buddy and I, who I went with, and these people at the lunch spot that like recommend this place to go to, and then also the healer of my friend just said that she went and it was like the most incredible magical place. We go there and there's all these caverns, caves, deep in nature, but also these wild, originally Freemason built temples and this palace. So that was very, very interesting for, I feel like, what led the following couple of days, because then I got to go and do the Muji interview, which was...
I saw that.
I got to spend the whole day with Muji, going around Mate Sahaja and spending the day with him up and down the cobblestone roads and the Christ temple and beautiful, beautiful like ashram temple center for self-realization, they call it. And that was very powerful for... I mean, I could close my eyes at any moment and go back to that time with Muji as such I feel like unlocking of deeper heart awareness is what I would say, because there was so much profound gravity in the stillness of meditating together and obviously being in conversation and everything, but I just got to feel him so much and everybody there and the time there. And so I was floating on cloud 9 by the time I even got to Egypt. And, then we have 5 or 6 days or so in Egypt going to these different temple sites and being with everybody. The there was one point, I think it was on the last farewell dinner, where I took a step aside from the whole group and I went on my own, away from everybody, and just sat. And it was windy, but I just got away from everybody and just sat in the sand, right in front of the Great Pyramid.
This is at when we had the last dinner event?
Last dinner, yeah. So
oh,
kind
really?
of hopped the fence and like went to
You
the
did?
left.
Okay. All right.
I went off to the
That could have ended badly.
No, I went to the left, so I didn't like go way up too close. It was
I did tell you by the time I had to get one of our team members out of jail.
Really?
Out of Egyptian jail.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
it was, yeah. He decided to do that, except it was inside the Great Pyramid. And then they locked it.
Oh, no.
And he got stuck in the subterranean chamber behind padlock during
Sounds
horrible. Ramadan. During Ramadan.
Oh, my God.
When the pyramids closed. So he wasn't even sure that they were going to open it in the morning. So he's like screaming in the morning, help, help, help. And the guy comes in and he's like, you want some water? After all night, he'd been looking for like plastic bottles of like half drunk water, you know, and he's like peeing and he's like, do I have to drink my pee? I mean, he's literally going through all of this, and I had to get him out of Egyptian jail in the morning, which was pretty epic. But yeah, I had to do many mea culpas, but thankfully you made it back.
No, you got to respect the culture.
That's right.
Respectful, and as much as that sounds fun, like how much some of the people there would love to have climbed the Great Pyramid. Also, you've been thrown in jail, and everybody would have been, you know,
that would have been really bad. Yeah, that would have been really bad. Okay, but what happened? So you're in the sand,
side note,
looking at the pyramid.
Yeah, I was just like, I had a really deep meditation, beautiful meditation, music playing in the background. The spotlights are on the pyramids, just lighting up the plateau, and just really anchoring in. I feel like just integrating a moment for myself away, because you're with all these incredible people in communication. Of course, you want to be talking and like learning about each individual, and there's just so much going on nonstop. I tried to have a few moments where I took that space out for myself. One was in the subterranean chamber, where I was just laying in this tiny hole, which is an incredible experience. You know,
can you talk about that for just a moment?
Sure.
What that's like for people? I mean,
yeah,
because it's not everybody goes in that thing. It can be a little daunting and crazy dark.
It is. Yeah, if you're claustrophobic, or you're crawling on all fours for.
How big is the hole?
Right?
It's like this big, right?
How big is the hole?
Yeah,
there's many different.
Well, into the tunnel that ends in a wall.
Right. So once you get to that point, it's maybe a couple hundred feet or so, and you're crawling on all fours, basically to get to the end of this point where you just lay down and there's 13 billion pounds of stone and crystal that are above you that you can energetically feel the weight of, and it's complete pitch dark, silent, just void, and that's powerful. The void is powerful. If you can find comfort in the unknown, in the void, in the silence. Just getting to rest there, and you just feel like you're in the gravity of something that has so much memory. And so I feel like codes were swapped in ways I'm not consciously aware of. And
I just got chills on that one.
Yeah, it feels very much so. Like
you got some codes.
In Egypt, seeds were planted, which have still yet to sprout. But that was a powerful moment. And then sitting in the sand, looking at the Great Pyramids, that moment of integration for myself, just allowing the deeper settling into my own heart awareness of seeing these magnificent structures. Who knows fully what their purpose was? We could philosophize and debate all day on what purpose they served or still serve, or what they're here to remind us of. At the very least, they elicit the feeling of awe. They remind us how big we can dream, how big we can grow and build, and just the sheer magnitude of them is inspiring. And so sitting in that deeper heart awareness of what I really feel like I'm here to be a bridge for, and what I am in devotion to in this life, and very much so feeling the feeling of acceptance of my own dharma at a deeper level. And that is both very emotionally opening, and for me felt just like so much gratitude. Also feel the weight of the responsibility, also feel the honor of the responsibility, and feel a deep acceptance of like, all right, let's go. I'm here for it. I'm here for this, and just giving a moment for myself, I feel like even just like I said, deeper, even deeper ways anchored that awareness and acceptance and responsibility into myself. And so that was a little bit of the journey from Portugal to Egypt, to those moments in between, being with everybody and then by myself. But it was a moment that I will remember for the rest of my life. My first time in Egypt. Thank you so much for helping steward that time out there. Anybody who can go, I recommend, please do go. If you get to with Robert in some incredible fashion, he's the best guide. But that time changed me forever, and ways and yet just are still fully unseen. But what I can tell you now is that it unlocked many things within my heart and within my belief of what I'm capable of.
Okay, so let's talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
So what do you think, and maybe not only for you, but also for humanity at large, what are we capable of?
I think we're right now getting a disproportionate perspective of the disaster that we're capable of. I think most people are pretty well aware of how quickly we can destroy the biosphere, how much we can continue to propagate war and division on the planet. So I think we're aware of that. And on the opposite side, I've also seen in the past year some of the most magic with my own two eyes and ears, and perceived incredible, miraculous things. And I know that I had this conversation with Daniel Schmachtenberger, who is an incredible thinker, a brilliant mind, and he's very well informed to the state of the planet that we're on right now. And one kind of analogy was like, if you were to chart a woman's pregnancy as giving birth, in terms of what it's the nutrients that it's taking from the mother's body, and you put it on like an 8-month graph or whatever, and you see what's happening to the woman. If you kept on that trajectory, it's not looking good in a couple of years. If you forget that there's a moment of birth, right? Because everything radically changes in that moment of this miracle when the baby is born, and things completely change biologically within a woman. And so I think right now we're approaching what seems like complete extinction of the human race if you look at it on that linear graph.
Okay, I like. I wasn't expecting that, but yes, okay, keep going. But I can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it just looks like everything's falling apart. In many ways, it is. And if you don't understand the potential of what's coming for birthing a new paradigm,
It could be pretty bleak.
Yeah, it could be very bleak. I mean, it's depressing to look
Like
at it
when
like
the
that
number
way.
one movie, right, on Netflix is Leave the World Behind. That should tell you something.
Yeah, or Don't Look Up, which was another one.
Don't Look Up.
Just turning a blind eye.
Don't Look Up, exactly. Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that I really believe that we're capable of a completely radically new paradigm that is approaching us. The time has come for a complete new level of consciousness to become embodied in the human race, and unfortunately,
Amen.
And that unfortunately comes on the B side of some sort of traumatic experience within the collective. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody or the human species, but I feel like in many ways it's inevitable for us to be able to awaken. We have to experience how bad it is and how bad it's getting. And I think a lot of us are, it's easy to turn a blind eye to how much our actions, even just contributing to animal agriculture and supply chain and so many different things, are contributing to a world that we don't want us to live in. And like Charles with his incredible book, the more beautiful, Charles, with the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. If we think from the mind and trying to logically, rationally plot our way to the new earth, we're not going to get there. But if we first tap into the potential that we know that's capable within our heart, then within our reason and within the logic we can use as a partner to make the shift. And so I feel deeply within myself, and I know as you do from the actions that you're taking, that I know that humanity is capable of miracles, and I believe in the human spirit. And the more that I get to meet incredible individuals, and that we have the opportunity, and what I feel like I'm doing my part as a bridge in for many ways is a bridge for this understanding to be met within the public eye, and then also a bridge for the individuals to meet each other that then become another node in which we can connect for like the new earth to be birthed. And so that,
And yeah, you're definitely living that. You've connected me to a lot of people, and I'm sure you will yet connect people like me to other people,
yeah,
and that will lead to incredible things. You know, I was thanking this morning Justin Resvani.
yeah,
I had a call with him this morning, and I thanked him because I was like, hey, because of you, I ended up becoming friends with Matthias. And all the things that have come out of that is like mind-boggling. You know, we've been on trips together now, several, and we're going on another one together. And I think that it's so powerful when you can be a connector to these different people that are on their path and journey, and then you can kind of find where the Lego piece fits perfectly to
yeah.
whatever it is that consciousness is trying to build and erect.
I get very fired up when talking about this because I see the potential there. And it's not like the brilliant minds don't exist, but
They're just not connected.
they haven't
always.
met each other.
Yeah.
Like if they came into contact, there are new novel ideas that would come as a new level of intelligence is revealed in the presence of each other. Because
You did that
I
with
truly believe
with
that.
Clea Irwin with me as well, you know,
Yeah.
and that was powerful because now we became friends out of that. And
Yeah.
he talked my ear off. I talked his ear off all night at
Yeah.
the, you know, it was supposed to be a New Year's Eve party, but you know, we're talking about crazy physics stuff. We had a crowd in the beginning, and then people were like, "Okay, enough math." But I think it's such a powerful thing, and I definitely see that as part of your great mission here. And this is, you know, back to the beginning of what you were talking about as well. You're like, okay, you're thinking about doing mission work and how you sink into and have this tangible experience with the suffering of humanity. I think that is a very powerful thing. You know, and when I was 19 years old, I was a missionary, and I did that. I lived in a rice field, and you know, I built houses in Mexico, and I did it in Korea, and all that kind of stuff. And it was one of the most incredible experiences of my whole life. But I also know that my mission for what I'm supposed to do now is exactly what I'm doing right now. And there's nothing more powerful in my life than knowing that. And you're on that journey. So as a man who's looking back, you know, I'm in my second Saturn return now. You're in such a great place that you could impact so many people's lives with such a great, bright future ahead to help connect the dots of this new paradigm, which I think requires whole new ways of looking at organization, whole new ways of looking at institutions in general, right? From education to government to religion to you name it, all of these structures that we have that are based on hierarchy. It just feels like if we connect in the right ways, and I think that's why I was so excited about blockchain technology, because blockchain is decentralized. And much in the same way we went to Egypt and there was no leader among us, even though I was the host, right? Everyone was a leader. Everyone there was a leader. I didn't have to feel like there had to be one leader, which was the most powerful experience for me, to know that that even could exist, because I've not experienced it before. How do we build these types of things? How do you, with your talents, bring people together, these brilliant minds, so that we can create new approaches to things that can build on the wisdom of the ancients, as well as just experience that we've all had of what works and what doesn't work? And how do you see that all coming together?
Very much so, like you just said. I think it's important to first have the experiences where you really are touched personally. Like when I went to Nigeria a few years ago, and you see the pain in a woman's eyes in this village I went to in Makoko, where there's so much pain that she wouldn't even let herself feel, or like hopes and dreams she wouldn't even allow herself to envision because of how painful the reality of her current life is. And you know, getting to experience which I have, and I feel called to still like have that in me, right? And then once you have that in you, of course, like align with your dharma and what you're most competent in, and how you're most called in this life to activate, right? And so for me, that very much I agree with, like being the connector and bringing those dots together and bringing the brilliant minds together and allowing things to be revealed through that. So I think the new organizations and institutions and all these things that will be birthed with with these right individuals coming together and having a think tank, or having these conversations and roundtable discussions, and opening the dialogue in a way that allows space for out of the box creative thinking. And so yeah, I agree with everything that you said, and I just pray to continue to walk with humility and devotion of this path, and continue to ask and receive in a big capacity from universal guidance to point me in the right direction to be of just best use in this life. I really just want to serve, and I want to carry that heart of service with me for the rest of my life. And I am very much in devotion to the solutions, bringing those to this planet and alleviating suffering. And I think that really does come, at least how I'm called to, with bringing the minds and hearts of people together that can bring innovative new paradigm solutions to the planet. So,
I had a really interesting conversation with someone who's very special to you, and that's Blue, just a couple of days ago. And I'd seen her post on social media, which was like, I don't know if you saw the one where she's like, I'm just annoyed at everything today.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she's like, she finds some egg in her hair or something, and she's like, throws it out, and then she gets up to throw the table over. And I reached out to her. I'm like, hey, how are you? She's like, I'm just annoyed on everything today. And she goes, but I'm just being that which is needed.
Yeah.
And I love the way she said it, because I was like, so if I'm like in a bad mood one day, I'm at the office, and I can just say, I'm just being that which is needed. Right. And so and the way she put it, she's like, yeah, I'm being a dick, that which is needed. And I said, okay. Because sometimes I think, we can surrender into the notion of that which is needed for our highest and best purpose. And that might come in an authentic form of us being like, okay, something is not working, let's fix it. And so that which is needed is that someone needs to say, this is not working, let's fix it. And it doesn't all have to be like, dandelions and flowers in a field and everything's happy and it's like flower of life, perfection. Sometimes it can be somewhat messy, and that's okay. But it's that which is needed. And so that's what I think I'm trying as well, to become devoted to understanding my Dharma. The path for Egypt for me was entirely a path within. It was the journey within. For me, going to the Great Pyramid, I felt like it was a return for me. And I was profoundly changed by it. And I'm still, even from my first trip, profoundly changed by it. It's changed my entire life. There's nothing in my life that I can say was not impacted by my journey within. Because my journey to Egypt was really my journey within. And understanding that which is needed and surrendering into that has been the challenge and the joy of my existence for the last 10 years or so. And so how do you feel about this idea of surrender? So we've got this world that seems like the wheels are coming off, right? And a lot of people are probably afraid of that. What's the best thing to do for someone who's consciously minded along this journey, where we watch these edifices of judgment, really? If you look at the major aspects of society that seem to be kind of in dissolution right now and falling apart, what's the best thing for a conscious-minded individual to do during this time in your view?
What comes to mind is that the more we let go of and surrender our own egoic imperative, the more that we make space for syntropy and syntropic receptivity. And
so what is syntropy, for those that may not know what syntropy is?
To go from chaos
sounds
to
like
order.
Entropy, but it's the opposite of entropy.
Moving the other direction, right? So more order in the world, and aligning ourselves with the divine will, if you want to call it that. And being in alignment with our Dharma is, in my eyes, what would be
Syntropic.
syntropic. So how to arrive at that place, right? How to surrender our egoic imperative. To me, it's been more of a process, initially starting out as what can I do? What can I accumulate? How can I learn? To what can I unlearn? How deep can I listen? How much more can I pay attention? And something that I say often is when we get quiet, what needs to get heard will be loud. And so
Wait,
when,
hold on. When we get quiet, what needs to get heard will be loud.
yeah.
It's almost like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah.
Concept.
Yeah, absolutely. When we find that the still, like, there are things within us that are screaming for attention, but because we live in such a noisy age and we're so distracted and we don't have the capacity to sit in a room alone with ourselves to pay attention, we're not aware of it. It's not within our conscious awareness. The more that we find moments of stillness and we have practices that can support this as well, then I feel like when we really come into that process, it becomes much more simpler, like aligning and discovering our dharma and purpose. It can be, a path that comes to various different moments in our life where we're just in deep moments of receptivity and listening. And so how can I become more receptive instead of how can I accumulate and achieve more? How can I receive more? How can I listen deeper? And often that is coming as a byproduct of removing what's in the way of that. And man, meditation has been the biggest practice for me in my life that's just created more
You also did a
space.
darkness retreat, didn't you?
Yeah, that's something that I've done as well. I'm just interested in exploring my own consciousness and seeing what happens when you make space and just empty yourself. And that's one thing Muji wrote me this little letter before heading out, and I mean, definitely stuck with me. He said, "Empty yourself so the vastness of God can enter your being," and I love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I love that. Just to really empty myself and to send that prayer up, like, let me be that which is needed. Let me I want to be used as a vessel for God and the well-being of this planet and all sentient life. And so if we can listen and use that prayer, then I just feel like we can't go wrong. Like life will give to us what is needed, and that might not be comfortable at times. It might be extremely uncomfortable, but if it's the path we chose, it's the path we chose.
So on that, you use the word God. How do you describe, not define, but how do you perceive what God is?
I think I grew up in a culture and society that very much so had this monotheistic view of God, right? With this white bearded dude in the sky. I used to resent that a lot, and also I kind of view belief in this context as like a pacifier for our insecurity of not knowing.
Ouch. That's a good one.
I mean, it's, we're uncomfortable with the unknown, and I get it, and it's okay to make space for that part of ourselves.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting. I get your point.
Yeah. And so I really love to just come back into that place where I don't know what I don't know. And so I don't claim to know more than I know. When it comes to my own perception of God, there is this inherent, undeniable, intelligent, creative force that weaves within us all, mm-hmm. that I am very attuned to, and mm-hmm. that I pay attention to. Mm-hmm. That to me feels like God. There is an intelligence that is so loving. There is an intelligence that gives us what we need, truly what we need, in moments where we feel like we don't need it. If we have enough context for our life's path, then we'll see how it was necessary for different moments. And yeah, God to me feels like that beautiful, inherent, loving awareness that flows within each of us in all life. The consciousness that weaves within the rocks and the trees, just like it does within you and me. Mm-hmm. And I just pray that I can continue to walk a path where I'm aligning myself with that intelligent force, and to be a force for good, and to be a steward for more well-being for all sentient beings on this planet. That's to me what I view as living a life of God and living in alignment with that. That's what comes to mind first.
And one last question. Our theme when we went to Egypt was free your voice. And to me, that was really about authenticity. And it's, I think, the stage that we're in as a planet right now as well, that this global throat chakra, the Great Pyramid, actually is the throat chakra of planet Earth. What is your view on how to embody absolute authenticity? And I know that's got to be part of your path, because you have definitely become a big voice for consciousness and a new paradigm, but you've also become a big ear. You're a big listener, and that's one of the things that I find most impressive about what you do. But how can you give context to our viewers of what some approaches would be to really become that voice of freedom and become a voice of absolute authenticity to who you are?
Yeah. To me, coming back down into, if you really want to understand who you are, you first, and it's important to gain awareness as to who you're not. And that comes with what I was speaking to earlier, that path of surrendering all of those narratives that you've accumulated that are not yours. What you believe you desire, what you believe you're worthy of, what you think is a well-lived life. Like, really examining, is this actually mine? Did I arrive at this authentically within myself first and foremost? Because if I'm trying to live an authentically expressed life where I free my voice and I'm connecting with individuals that inspire me, and like whatever a well-lived life looks like to all the listeners right now, how can I arrive there if I'm not in touch with that authentic place within myself first and foremost?
Right.
And so that's the path of healing. And there's many different paths to arrive at that place, and I don't know what that looks like for everybody. I know for me it's looked like a lot of silence, a lot of meditativeness, a lot of reflection in my men's group, in community, in partnership. I think romantic partnership can be one of the biggest ways in which we are revealed our own limiting beliefs, and where we're still stuck and where we still hold judgment. So really using all of the inevitable obstacles, challenges, difficulties in life for opportunities of growth, and to discover what you truly value. And to me, that clarification of what we really value in our deeper core, what really moves us, from a place where it's connected to our heart. Because I think that the mind can confuse us very often in terms of trying to figure out the life that is authentic to us, but the heart knows. And so coming into deeper coherence with that heart and the intelligence of the heart rather than just the intellect of the mind, I think points us right there. What do we find joy in doing? Regardless of whether it was received, if it's playing music or if it's some sort of creative urge. Creativity has so many different facets of how it expresses itself. It's not just music and painting, for example, but it can be in literally how you do and how you have the pep in your step and dance when you do the dishes. And like I really view that creative, artistic way can be expressed in so many different ways and facets. To me, I think my own journey of uncovering and freeing my own voice and path of authenticity has been as much of discovery as it has been like creating and choosing and claiming who I want to be. And I think that's like when I started the podcast, I didn't know if it was going to work out. I didn't know how it was going to be successful. I didn't know so many different things, but I had this inclination. I was paying attention to this whisper that started to become more prevalent of a direction that I felt called to move in. And then you take those risks. Like you invest in yourself, you take those risks and you show up and you express yourself and you use your voice. Like we all have a voice, we just need to use it more and be okay in being perceived as somebody that will fall and that will mess up at times. And to me, the most beautiful person who's found acceptance in that, and not just on the never ending path of self-improvement, but actually self-acceptance.
Well, that's the full journey, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is hopefully where we get, is that maybe self-acceptance is what profoundly changes our world. that we can finally accept that we've become the change that we wanted to see. Thank you so much. So grateful to have you here with me. So blessed and humbled that we can weave together on so many different things, and look forward to a future of helping to move the needle together in all the different ways that we can. That's that which is needed.
Yeah. Amen, bro. And I mean, we've only probably known each other for a year, but we've lived a lot of life in that time, and I'm just so grateful for our paths to be crossed.
Likewise.
And, yeah, man, I just love you, and I'm always here for you, as I feel that you are always there, there for me. And yeah, I pray that people can find relationships where they truly feel like the reciprocal energy of investing into each other, and there's just so much beauty when you show up in your relationships with the question of what can I give and how can I support versus what can I get. And I feel like in our connection and so much of our community also is showing up with that heart of giving and generosity. And you're one of the most incredibly generous individuals I've met. And man, just so grateful for you and our time in Egypt and our time podcasting together.
Well, and I'm grateful to you also for helping us set up the studio. You gave your perspective and thoughts very early on.
Little part.
Yeah, but we kept saying, well, Andre said do this. So obviously it had a big impact, and I'm grateful to you for that. And that's just kind of the person you are. And I could keep going on and on and on. We both could. Yeah. But thank you so much. And how can people find you and find all about your awesome podcast, Know Thyself?
Thanks. Yeah, it's just, if you just search Know Thyself podcast, you'll find it. You'll find me. It's got a picture of my mug on the podcast art. And yeah, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere. I'm sure if you've listened to podcasts, you maybe have seen them on on my show. And I'm excited to have you back on in the future years to come. And yeah, if you want to find me, yeah, you can find me.
And you're on Instagram and all that too.
Yep.
I've seen you there. So thank you so much, Andre.
Thank you, bro.